Traumatic childhood happenings affect all of us more than we know, especially if there's not a strong parent to interpret what just happened. I should know. I have a story. My mom died the day I was born. My dad chose to never remarry. So he raised us as a single parent, and in those days, it was hard. He was able to put food on the table and clothe us and keep us under shelter, but he also had the duties to be our educator and our religious instructor also. And so he tried to balance all of those things as best he could. But see, there was tyranny over us. It's called the Roman Empire. And when I was 8 years old, my dad came to me and my siblings, and he said, "You're going to be staying with your aunt for a while. I have to go on a trip." See, he had to travel from northern Galilee, where we live, to a place called Emmaus, far to the south, which was his hometown, because a new tax, an additional tax, had been levied. It was called a temple tax, and it was for a temple in another place far away from us for a god named Jupiter that my dad did not believe in and did not worship, but he would have to help provide the taxes for that. And in those days, money was really tight, and my dad understood that well, but he had no recourse. And so he started the long walk to register. He came back 2 weeks later, and he seemed a little different. A little more downcast, a little more beaten up, a little less hopeful, because my dad was the chief hope giver. He always instructed us that as good, devout Jews, there was this great Messiah, this great King that one day would come, and one day he would restore order and restore peace, because we were the chosen people. But he seemed to not quite believe that anymore. And so we all noted that. And we got back to life as usual. Just a few short years later, right at my 15th birthday, my dad died. In jail, failure to pay the temple tax. At 15 years of age, I became an angry, angry young man. And the only target for my anger was the Romans. They were responsible, I felt like, for the death of my father, leaving me and my siblings orphans. And so looking for identity, looking for a sense of community, I went looking for anyone who could help me in that. And I fell in with a bunch of street thugs. And we had a lot of adventures, and we got into a lot of trouble. And so that rocked along. And at some point, maybe 18, 19, I decided that I was tired of waiting on this messianic patience that I was supposed to have and that I had been taught all my life. The time for talk had ended. I was going to become a man of action. For right or wrong, I was going to make something happen. And I was hugely motivated by the anger that was welling up inside of me. And so I'll tell you what I did to slake that in just a few minutes. But that's what this story is about tonight. So how about you? What's your story? What's your great cause? What's your mission? I had decided at 18 that I was going to get involved in something that was such a cause to believe in that I would die for it if necessary, and I would take a life for it if expedient. Do you have such a cause? You've all been invited here, but can you all be trusted? We're not sure. And so therefore my associates will be coming through the crowd in just a few minutes to hear your stories and to see if they're valid. And for those of you in the balcony, they'll come and hear your stories, but they will need to see some identification for you also to make sure your story matches your identification. Me? I am Barabbas, son of the Father, and I will have my vengeance, either in this life or the next. As far back as I can remember, I had a friend. He was a young boy about my age. We did the catechisms together in our church. We learned the scriptures together. We sometimes would share our dads as educators. His name was Simon. And Simon saw the world as I did. And Simon was especially a good friend when my father passed away. He was always there for me, always ready to listen. And over those years, he started to believe as I did. The time for action is now. The time to pursue a just cause to liberate our people is now. And then one day, he introduced me to a man, and a whole new world opened up that I had never realized was even there. You see, about the time of the temple tax, there were a group of Pharisees in Jerusalem who decided, as I did, that it was time for action. And so they left the Pharisee party and they formed a new group. And this group that rose up was to be known as the Zealots. And the Zealots were a religious group that you would call today pretty fanatical, pretty radical, but they also were seeking political change and social justice. And so their new purpose was simply this: we're going to affect change, and we'll use violence and terror tactics if that's what it takes. And so the leader of the Zealot party had wanted to meet me. And so we sat down. At the end of that conversation, I was in. This was exactly the formal expression of what I had been thinking and feeling for years and years and years. It was perfect. It was the perfect plan for me. We would use religion to gain our freedom. And so Simon and I got in and we started our training, the physical regimen, the emotional testing. And of course, we continued to read the scriptures, but now it was in order to use the scriptures for our gain and our benefit. And so somewhere several months after that, in that role, I started to realize Simon and I were drifting in opposite directions. He was taking one road and I was taking another. Mine occurred when another guest came to visit with me and present his ideas to me. And he was once a zealot, still identified, but another group, even within the zealot party, was starting to rise up. And they were known as the Sicaries. And in our language, that means the dagger men. The Sicaries were a small little sect of assassins. And they had decided that we will seize the right opportunity and we will start to influence Rome by taking out some key dignitaries, political figures, whatever. And I was being asked to get into the Sicari group, and I readily accepted. You know, there are some causes worth dying for if necessary, but also worth killing if expedient. And so here was our plan. It was very simple, but very effective. We Sicaries decided that we would not do our work at night under darkness. We would use the terror tactics of broad daylight and in the biggest crowd possible for the maximum impact. And here's how it would work. We would see a public gathering somewhere, maybe at the market, maybe a demonstration, maybe a parade, something, and we would start to select our target. And once we selected our target within the group, we would stalk them from behind. And then at the proper moment, we would come up behind them while everyone seemed to be distracted, and we would bring out our weapon that was concealed, the Sika knife. Hence, we are Sicaries. And the third step of this is we would come up behind our suspect, and we would secure him, and we would jab the knife. We would stab him between the third and the fourth rib and give it a twist to make sure that we connected with the heart. And then we would pull it out, resheath our weapon, and the fourth step we would start yelling, someone help this man. He needs medical attention, because by then he would be crumpled to the ground. And then when all the attention came to be helping this man who was dying and would die, the fourth step, we would slowly stroll away. It was very simple and very effective. I had done this maneuver with a tax commissioner and was very successful and undetected. I had also selected a small claims court magistrate, and I was very successful and undetected. I was rising within the ranks of the Sicarii, and I was proud to be serving my nation. I mentioned Simon was going in a different direction. He had been introduced to some holy man, some prophet, some teacher from Nazareth of all places. And he was completely taken by this man's teaching and by his demeanor. And so we talked about it occasionally. And I said, are you still a zealot? And he says, well, I'm still officially a zealot, but I need to tell you, I believe this man has something to offer that I have never seen before. And I'll have to admit, Simon seemed different. Simon seemed more at peace. Simon seemed to be more in control of his emotions. Simon seemed to be more settled. It bothered me. It disturbed me. I thought, here's my friend, and he's already quitting the cause. And then he started to ask me to check it out too. I had no intention of getting involved in such a religious group. I'm busy. I'm doing what I did so well and I did best. And finally, one day he said, please, just come hear him talk. He's giving a talk tomorrow, and I'll introduce you to him afterwards. We're leaving this afternoon. We're going to, and he named the town to the north. He said he'll be lecturing that afternoon. And you can just go up and you can listen to him and just see what you think. And I finally begrudgingly agreed. So that next morning I left to go up, and I underestimated the time, and I got there a little late. And I was really surprised to see at the house where he was inside, and he had already started his lecture. It was packed. There were people standing shoulder to shoulder, all in that house. There were people walking around the yard. There were people leering into the windows trying to hear. I tried to elbow and shove my way in there somehow because Simon's in there somewhere. I got nowhere. Suddenly a forearm shoves me from the back, and I wheel around angrily, and I realize the man who did that to me had stumbled. He's dragging a heavy weight. He had the corner of a bed sheet, and three other men had the other corners, and they're carrying this paralyzed friend of theirs who had been that way for years and years and years. And then it dawned on me, they got here a little late like I did. They were hoping that somehow this holy man could do something to help their friend, but they were too late. But they creatively looked around, and they saw the staircase going up to the flat roof. And they took it, and they lugged this man up there. I had nothing better to do, so I just followed them. They get to the roof, and they gently laid their friend down who's laying flat on his back on top of that roof. And they started to tear the tiles and the shingles off of this man's roof. And when they got the hole big enough to lower him through, they tied ropes to the sheet, the corners, and they easily laid him down, lowered him, and it was a perfect shot right where this man was teaching. By now, of course, everything had stopped. Everyone's gaping up at this hole in the roof now, and who is doing what? And they let him down, and he comes to rest on his back on that floor right in front of this man. I see Simon over in the corner. I'm peering over, looking down, and at that, this man, his name was Jesus, he looks up and his gaze fell on me, and he locked a stare on me that I had never felt in my life. I tell you, it was as if he was boring straight through my skull and reading my mind, and he knew exactly what was on my mind. It completely disconcerted me. And I thought, you know what? He thinks I damaged this man's roof. He's going to make me pay for the damages for this roof. And so with that, I pointed to the ones who really did it. Like, it wasn't me, it was them. And with that, he breaks into this big grin and just shakes his head like that's not even important. And then his focus went back onto the man on the floor. With that, I got on my belly and started peering down that hole to get as close as I could to try to hear what he was saying. Couldn't hear everything. One of the 4 friends of his did the same. He got on his belly next to me. What I did hear very clearly was this. Jesus raised his voice and he said, "Just so you will know, I have the authority to forgive sins. Take up your mat and walk." And this man's eyes got big, and you could see him straining. And suddenly he sat up, and that withered, frail back was as strong as steel. And as he's sitting up and everyone is gasping, he holds his hands out like, "Someone help me up." And people reach out and they pulled him to his feet. And I tell you, I was there. I saw it. Those tiny, skinny, frail, weak legs suddenly were strong, and they supported his weight. And these people are holding him to steady him, and he's actually standing, and he shoves them away as if to say, "Let me try this." And he actually had the balance and the strength to stand up. And then unexpectedly, he does this. And he's got this huge grin on his face. And this mass of people is just stone silent for seconds. And then they erupted. I mean, there's people slapping each other on the back. There's people praising God. There's people hugging each other. They're hugging him. They're congratulating him. It was just pandemonium down there. You should have heard it. I glanced over at his 4 friends, and the 3 that were standing, they're dancing around and they're hugging each other and they're praising God. My partner on the floor, on the roof, who's still on his belly, he didn't move a muscle. He started to weep, and these big convulsions just consumed his body, and he was sobbing. Years and years of trying to help his friend and help provide for his family, and going from doctor to doctor, from place to place with no results, were now coming in on his mind. And he just cried and he cried and he cried. And these big tears were flowing from his eyes and splattering on that dusty floor down below. That night, I got with Simon. I had questions. And Simon at one point held his hand up and he said, "You need to understand, this is not the only thing I've seen. And it won't be the last thing I have seen. I believe this man could be the one." The who? The anointed one. The Christ. The great King we've been waiting on. I'm not sure, but I believe he is the one. I'm not ready to go there yet. I remember telling Simon, it would be great if that is the case. But we have been waiting so long. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do what I was created to do. And if he wants to come in and save the world and liberate all of us, I'll be glad to help him in that endeavor. But until I see that, I'll continue to do what I do. I'll continue to be a dagger man. And so we parted ways that night. It was a little awkward. It was a little cold. And I didn't see Simon for a good while. But our paths would cross again one of these in a story that I'll be telling you in just a minute or two. I know this. I have this cause that is worth dying for. And if need be, it is worth killing. I am Barabbas. And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Later that year, the biggest week on the calendar rolled around, the Passover feast week. And like always, I headed to Jerusalem. I traveled down there as a pilgrim, as so many others did. Jerusalem in those days would swell to as much as 6 times its population for that week. And many of the travelers would come in on the Sunday leading into that week. It's called the Day of Preparation because there's a lot of chores to do, a lot of things to see about, a lot of arrangements to be made. And so I did that also because I had a very important meeting. The head of the dagger men, the Sicarii, wanted to see me. You see, I was continuing to rise through the ranks, and my talents were being recognized and being valued. And so there were so many people in town, and there was a heavy Roman presence that week for fear of a rebellion, for fear of a revolt. And so our organization had decided this would be a great week to bring the world to notice that we are around and that we are working against Rome. And I was eager and willing. And so the word on the streets that day, on that Sunday, was a buzz in anticipation of, would this holy man from Nazareth, Simon's rabbi, would he show up? Because everyone knew there were groups in town that hated him and they wanted to take him out. And that was the big scuttlebutt. And then later that afternoon, I hear this buzz on the streets where I am. And it was like, we think he's here. We think he's on the outskirts of town getting ready to come. And so I followed the crowd and we went out the eastern gate. And you can see the Mount of Olives from there. And sure enough, way up on top of the hill, there's a group of men followed by many more people, men and women. And I could barely make out a couple of them. And there he was. There was Jesus. The next thing I know, somebody produces a donkey. And he gets on the donkey as if to start riding the donkey into town. And I remember thinking, some king he is, some Messiah he is, can't even find a horse. He's having to ride a donkey. But this would serve my purposes extremely well. Because as the crowd piled out of the city and the great excitement and great noise and great anticipation, I saw a very target-rich environment. And sure enough, after a few minutes, I spotted my target and selected him. This was a Roman senator. This was a high-value target. And I must tell you, I was naturally good and created, I think, to do this. Because see, Sicarii, the human anatomy works best if a left-handed assassin comes in, because the heart is close to the left side, right? And that was me. And so I saw this senator and I followed him around. And I waited on my chance, and I would check the progress of Jesus and his entourage. And as he got closer and closer, descending the Mount of Olives and down into the valley and back up, I saw my chance coming. And I strategically waited when the crowd got to the fever pitch of their excitement, and the racket got the loudest. And when he was almost just parallel with us on the street side where we were, I came up behind him and I did my deed. And I stabbed the senator and I gave it the twist. And then I started to yell for help. And he crumpled in a puddle of blood to the ground. And I slowly strolled away. I did it again, only this time, by sundown, the whole city had heard that a Roman senator had been assassinated. And I was proud of my achievement. So I went to a flat that I was renting for the week, and I just laid low that night. The next morning, I had to get out because I had agreed to meet Simon down at the temple, because this is what you do. You go and you worship every day on Passover week. So we went and we met and we went in, and we're heading into the inner courtyard to read our Psalms and to pray together. And no sooner had we walked into the inner courtyard, this racket happens, this cacophony of noise in the outer courtyard. What is going on? So we wheeled and we ran out to see what the matter was. And it was Jesus out there, Simon's rabbi, and you would say today he had lost his mind. He's taken a temple, a curtain cord, and fashioned a whip, and he's waving it over his head. He's upsetting and turning over huge wooden money tables. Livestock is running. He's chasing men out of there. I've never seen such dignified Pharisees sprinting for the exit like I did at that moment. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And when he finally calmed down and order was restored, I slapped Simon on the back and laughed, and I said, "Why didn't you tell me? You've been holding out on me. This man is a zealot at heart. We can use him and his talents." And Simon offered a weak smile, and he said, "Brother, this will not end well." And so I went back to my flat. On Tuesday morning, before first light, I heard a loud banging on my door, and I thought, what is wrong? And I got up sleepily, and I stumbled to the door. And as I undid the latch to unlock the door, it burst open, and 4 Roman guards, armed to the teeth, knocked me to the floor and kicked me around for a while and jerked me up and tied my wrists behind me and marched me off to jail and put me in jail. You see, someone had seen me take out the senator after all. And check this out. It was a fellow Jew, and he had turned me in for a paltry few silver coins. He should have thanked me rather than that. But there I was. And I knew my time was up, because I knew I would be found guilty. And so, on Wednesday, I appeared before the magistrate. And it went just as I expected. Guilty as charged. Sedition, insurrection, treason, and murder of a Roman senator, and they tagged a few others that had been unsolved on me also. 2 of them I did, others I didn't. Makes no mind. I was guilty, and I would be executed. There was good news and bad news that day. The bad news, death by crucifixion, the most cruel, torturous, evil method ever invented to kill a human. The Romans didn't invent it, but they perfected it. They had gotten it down to a fine science. And they enjoyed killing Jews that way. And that was to be my sentence, death by crucifixion. You want the good news? The good news was it was going to happen Friday. Why is that good news? It was 2 days later, because Friday at 6 o'clock begins the Sabbath. And the law states that a body cannot be left on the tree, on the cross, past 6 o'clock into the Sabbath. It'll desecrate the Sabbath. And I knew at least my suffering would have an end, that I would not linger into the next day or even possibly the third day. And that was good news to me. So Thursday, I'm there. I've got one more day left to live. And about mid-afternoon, I started really dreading the night because I knew sleep was not going to come. I took that opportunity. My mind started wandering back to, I'm going to be dying a young man. Have I accomplished anything with my life? Have I served the purpose that I believe was my just cause? I had done a great job at what I had done. I had risen through the ranks of the zealots into the Sicaries, and I had made certainly a name for myself and their group, and now I was becoming famous all over Jerusalem. But what did I accomplish? Was Israel free? No, it was not. Was Israel significantly different than back when my dad was paying the temple tax? No, it was not. And I slipped into a sense of despair, of meaninglessness. And there was a little bit of mental suffering going on that afternoon. A little bit after 7 o'clock, I heard footsteps coming down the hall, and they served me my last meal. Little did I know that across town, 13 men went into an upper room to have what for two of them would be their last meal also. How do I know this? Because my best friend Simon was one of those 13 men. And he was an eyewitness that night in what became one of the most dramatic scenes in all of our history. And I would contend in the history of the world. And because he was there, I can tell you exactly how that happened. Can I introduce you to the group? As they came in, they would have come in from the west side, up a staircase into a very bare but functional room on the second floor. They would have entered through the one door to the left. There would be a window on the other end for ventilation. And on that night, it's gently blowing a breeze and flickering the candlelight as they come in. The table has been largely set. They have enough places set. And so as they find their seat, let me introduce them. First, there was Philip. Philip was one of the younger of the group. Philip is a guy with short, curly, thick, brown hair, pretty intelligent guy. He deliberately chose this place, though, on this night because it's as far away from the host as he can get, because he asked a dumb question earlier in the day, and the leader was not in a mood to hear it. And he's been reprimanded, and he's just going to stay out of the action for tonight and mind his own business. Next to him is Thaddeus. Thaddeus and Philip are very close. They're pretty much birds of a feather. Thaddeus is an observer. He's a quick learner. Thaddeus will be one in years to come many will hear about in what is now present-day Europe. Thaddeus will stay faithful. Next to him is Bartholomew. If you were troubled and you needed a prayer intercessor, a prayer partner, this was your man. Bartholomew believed in the power of prayer. He knew all the scripture having to do with the spiritual formation of a man's relationship with God. And he was a valuable asset to this group because of that. Next to him is Andrew. Andrew has an older brother who's part of the group. And as typically you have found out, these brothers are polar opposites. Andrew is an introvert. His brother is not. Andrew is soft-spoken and quiet and reflective. His brother is not. Andrew is one to shy away from the limelight. He would rather be behind the scenes. His brother is not. But Andrew has developed this talent for building relationship, relieving trust issues, earning the respect of people that were strangers yesterday, and then bringing them to the Master to introduce them for a personal audience. And he has gotten to be super effective at just this thing. Next to him is James. If I've not told you, the leader, Jesus, is a master of nicknames. And he's hung a nickname from a couple of years earlier on James, who also has a brother. He called them the Sons of Thunder. And I won't elaborate on it, but they were not particularly proud of why they were called the Sons of Thunder. But James is a serious student and a serious mentor to some of the younger ones in the group. And James often was included in an inner circle with Jesus to experience and witness things that none of the rest ever got to see. Over on this side, in this position, was James, also James Alphaeus, to distinguish him from James, son of thunder. James Alphaeus in our language means the less. James was the shortest guy. James was a little pudgy. James was bald on top, this flaming orange beard. He was just a comical sight. And he was often the butt of the jokes and the pranks that the other men would engage in. And one reason was he was just so good-natured. Now, he could receive it, but he could also dish it out. Every group needs a James. Every group needs somebody that when it gets tense or when it gets tough, he can walk in and lighten the environment. And that was James Alphaeus. Next to him is my friend Simon. Simon also had a nickname, although he had left that party a long time ago. Simon the Zealot. Simon by nature was as intense a man as I have ever met in my life. Absolutely no humor. Simon was serious about everything he did and determined to a fault. I thought it was interesting that on this night, Simon finds himself next to a man named Thomas, who is next to a man named Matthew. Thomas first. Thomas was the opposite of James Alphaeus. Tall, handsome, wavy black hair, barrel chest. Another faithful servant. Another serious follower of Jesus. And Thomas got a bad rap later. After some of these events transferred on this weekend. And I think it was unfair. But to give you an indication of Thomas, Thomas was the one that spoke up when the debate raged about, do we go back to Jerusalem and take care of Lazarus? Thomas stood up and said, let's go. And if we die with him, we die with him. Thomas would go to Spain, and he would never back down. He would never back up on his faith. And he later was martyred for the cause that he lived for. Matthew is next. It took Simon a long time to warm up to Matthew because he was a publican. He was a traitor to the cause. He had sold himself to the Roman Empire, in my friend Simon's opinion. And Simon had nothing to do with him for 2 full years. But finally he realized this man is genuine. This man is seeking the way. This man is a follower of Jesus. This man believes that this leader is the Messiah. And he will not betray us. He will not quit on us. He's here for the long haul. Matthew has brought his writing utensils with him because he's trying to get as close as he can to the leader on this night so he can hear. He has this gut intuition. Something special will happen tonight. And I'm going to write it down and document this for future whoever wants to hear it. On the left side, next to the host, is Simon Peter. Simon Peter's brother is Andrew. Simon Peter was trying to get to be the place of honor. The right hand of the host is a little bit too slow, though, that night, and he got beat out. So he's at the next best place, and he's right next to Jesus. Very confident. He's often wrong, but he's never in doubt about it. Simon is the self-proclaimed spokesman of the group, when most of the group would rather him just keep his mouth shut. Jesus saw some qualities, though, in Peter that no one else had. Raw, yes. Unruly and unpredictable, yes. Too prideful, too egotistical, yes to all of those things. But Jesus kept at it as he was thinking, if I can just break him, if he will just be refined, this man will be an instrument, a mighty instrument in the hand of God. But on this night, as usual, Peter was a lot. John the beloved. A special relationship with Jesus. It was like they knew each other's thoughts. And John senses tonight what no one else is clued in on. Something is different about Jesus. He's quiet. He's pensive. He's here, but he's not here. And he interprets that to be trouble. And he keeps nudging him, and he keeps looking at him as if to say, are you okay? And so he's not going to leave his side no matter what tonight. And he has decided, no matter what happens the next 24 hours, I'm going to stay with him. That was John. I left one out. The only urbanite in the group, raised in the suburb of Jerusalem, the most educated in the group, the most talented financial mind in the group. They made him the treasurer. His name was Judas Iscariot. Tall, skinny, freckles on his face. He also deliberately has chosen to be as far away from the host as he can get tonight. And like Jesus, he's there, but he's not there. No one seems to notice that. But Judas is up to something. So as soon as they get settled in, Jesus takes the opportunity to start teaching as he was known to do. He walks over to the water basin and the towel used for cleaning before dinner, usually where the lowest ranking servant would do the duty. There was none there. This is a Spartan, low budget operation. There's no servants. So Jesus, the leader, takes it upon himself to pour the water out and to wrap the towel around his waist and to do that job. And as he comes over one by one, oh my goodness, the tension is palpable, and nobody wanted him washing their feet. And you could cut the tension with a knife. And when he gets around to Peter, guess what? Peter speaks up. You're not washing my feet. And Jesus said, hey, if I don't wash your feet, then you'll not have a part of me. And Peter predictably then said, well, then bathe all of me, please. And Jesus looked up at him and he said, that would be weird. I'll just do the feet. Thank you. And he finishes. And when he gets to Judas, Simon was a great place to watch. And Simon said, I couldn't take my eyes off of Jesus as he's looking up and washing the nasty, stinking, manure-caked feet of his 12th person. He looks up and he just simply said, I love you. And then he goes back to his place. And as host, he starts the evening off with breaking the bread, but he suddenly says, one of you will betray me. The room erupts. Matthew puts his head in his hands. Bartholomew starts to pray. People are arguing. I knew it was going to be Matthew. I knew it was going to, and they're pointing fingers. Peter leans back behind Jesus' back and whispers to John in a voice so loud they could have heard it out on the street. Ask him if it's me. Ask him if it's me. And Jesus simply says, it's the one that I dip into the cup and extend the bread to. And with that, he hands it to Judas. Judas reaches his bony arm out, and he takes it. And they stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. And Judas puts it to his mouth and suddenly stands up and wheels and stares at everybody in the room. And later, Thaddeus said, his face took on the face of Satan himself that I had never seen. And he bolted out of the door into the night. And by morning, he would be dead. Jesus then takes the bread again. He breaks it. He blesses it. And he says, I know what this always means, but there's a new deliverer in town tonight. And this represents my body, which tomorrow will be broken for you. When you do this, remember me. And then he took the cup. And he said, we all appreciate Moses and how God used him. But I say to you, tomorrow, this represents my blood, which will be spilled for the remission of your sins. Whenever you do this, remember me. Everybody left deeply troubled. They knew that something was going to be climactic that night. The next morning, as it's just becoming first light, I hear the footsteps coming down the hall. My time had come. It's Friday morning, and I heard the chain being unlatched on my door, and the door opened up, and they came to get me. And they bound me, and they marched me down the hall and another hall and out onto a back porch. And then I was shocked to see that at that early hour, with the dawn just starting to glow off in the horizon, there must have been 1,500 Jews out around that courtyard, and they were in an angry mood. They were a mob looking to get somebody. And I flashed hot and angry myself, because I'm thinking, could they not just let me die a dignified death? Are they going to humiliate me now? Are they going to torture me now? Just get on with it. Just put me on that cross. But then I realized, to my right, just 3-4 feet away, is Pontius Pilate himself, the governor. What is going on here? He raises his hands and finally gets order. And he says, so, as our custom to release a prisoner for the Passover week, shall I release Barabbas, or shall I release the King of the Jews? What? I looked around him, and then I saw him for the first time. It was Jesus, Simon's master, and he's already been beaten up. And he's standing there as a prisoner just like me. I found out as they read the charge, same charges as me: sedition, insurrection, treason. And the crowd erupted. Release Barabbas, release Barabbas. I could not. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I'm hearing. I am about to be released. Pilate clearly is agitated now. So he gets order again, and he says, so, then what shall I do with Jesus? Crucify him, crucify him. And so with that, Pilate orders it. He succumbed, he caved. and I am going free, and Jesus will be crucified on my cross. Unbelievable. But I was not quite yet free. The Roman guards decided that as a deterrence to any more crime and trouble out of me, maybe it would be good if before they let me go, they made me stand and watch the flogging. Well, I was irritated, but not particularly disturbed by that, because I've seen a lot of floggings in my day, and I have shed a lot of blood in my day. I'm not squeamish. So I had no other choice. They take Jesus and they tie his wrist off to the post, and he's standing there. They take his tunic off, his bare back exposed. They put me just a few yards away and forced me to stand there. And I've got to tell you, I've seen a lot of these. They beat that man like I have never seen a person be beaten. A lesser man would have died. He would not have survived. His back and his legs were a bloody ribbon within the 8th lash. They got 3 of the most fit, young Roman guards they could find, and they let him go at it. And when one would get tired, the next one he would rotate out, the next one would rotate in, and he would unleash savage delight right into his back until he gets tired, and they would bring a fresh one on. By the 29th lash, the only thing holding him up is his wrist being lashed to that post. And about every 8 or 9 licks, these guards behind me would shove me forward a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. And by number 39, I'm so close that I can smell the blood plasma. And then I realized his blood had splattered onto me. And I'm wiping his blood off of me. And then the words of Isaiah came to me. God spoke to me. By his stripes you were healed. And I realized Simon was right. I had been chasing the wrong plan my entire life. An innocent man was going to take my place. This is not a prisoner exchange. This is a substitution. This man was going to die. And his only crime was he loved everyone he came in contact with. Unconditionally. No holds barred. He was loving the people that were beating him to death. Me? I should have been killed several times. I should have been dead long ago. There was nothing but darkness in me. I was an angry young man. And my only real discernible talent was I was good at killing people. I was guilty of everything. Sedition, yes. Insurrection, absolutely. Treason, give me more of that. But I'm walking free. And I realized that day that my life was changing. I was being transformed. I was being made aware that there is a force more powerful than hate and anger and military power, more powerful than death, and that is the love of Jesus Christ. And no one is off limits. Everyone is eligible. And what I realized was that Friday, Sunday came around. And eventually the world would know what I've shared with you. And just as it is now, it may be Friday, but Sunday is coming. Sunday is coming. and its pleasures will all pass away. But the one who does the will of God will live forever.